Welcome to the High Performance Gym podcast, where we don't ask for permission to change. We rise, we lead, and rewrite the rules. Whether you're a young person trying to find your place in a world that wants to box you in, or a parent waking up to the reality that your health, your habits, and your headspace are the blueprint your kids are following, this podcast is your call to rise. Because you weren't born to burn out, you were built to evolve, and you're only one rep away. My name is Keay Witherspoon, founder of Lift Performance Academy, Bachelor of Applied Sport and Exercise Science, a self-study student of neuroplasticity and mental health, and most importantly, a dad to 3 incredible humans. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Dr. Nicky Keay. Dr. Nicky is a medical doctor and clinical lecturer at University College London, specialising in exercise endocrinology and performance health. She's the author of 2 books, Hormones, Health and Human Potential, and Myths of Menopause. And she's also a sought-after speaker for women's health, sports science, and performance education for dancers. For years, women have been told to push harder, eat less, train more. But what if the root of your fatigue, mood swings, or weight gain isn't effort or willpower, but something deeper? Dr. Nicky Keay joins me to unravel the Female Hormone Odyssey, a woman's life and hormones. From puberty through to menopause, we explore the silent epidemic of hormonal dysfunction in women and young girls who appear healthy on the outside but feel broken on the inside. So let's dive in. Welcome to today's podcast, Dr. Nicky. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Likewise, thanks for inviting me here.
To anybody listening, there may be a little bit of a lag on the recording, so hopefully that's not too bad. So Dr. Nicky, I've followed your work for a while. Incredible work. I went to one of your talks, and this is what kind of led me to working with you and getting to know your knowledge, because I think it's what every woman should know, and that's what we're going to do today. So what I want anyone listening now, what this podcast, how we're going to kind of structure this today. So Dr. Nicky is going to give us a little introduction to herself, but we're also going to tell us in a little bit of a story format. So we're going to go through what Dr. Nicky calls as the Female Hormone Odyssey. Female Odyssey. She'll explain what that is. So basically taking you guys through a life of women's hormones. You can kind of relate to certain areas of your life of where you're at now. If you've got daughters, even more important, because then you can help them through their journey. So we're going to go through that. So just before we start, Dr. Nicky is going to give herself a quick introduction and tell us who she is. So Dr. Nicky, over to you.
Thanks, Keay. And yeah, I'm really been a pleasure working with you and working with you still, Keay. So really great. So I'm a medical doctor, and my area of interest, expertise is in hormones, endocrinology. And I've got a slightly different spin on things, I would probably say, than the more what you might think conventional doctor, because of course, unfortunately, still people, of course, are going to get ill, and we have to treat them and help them. But I'm more trying to focus on helping people who are currently well to be even better, or to understand, as you say, their journey through their life, through how their hormones change. Because I feel that, we've only got one life and we want to make the most of it. So my job is now more focused on supporting people, helping them understand what's going on with their bodies, what are the practical things they can do to support them in their life journey, so they can reach their full potential and get them the most out of it, and hopefully avoid therefore, or put them in a better position to be healthy and less likely to become ill, by the way. So yeah, that's what I do. And so I see people individually, health advisory appointments. I give talks like you mentioned. I'm also a lecturer at University College London, so I teach students and I do research there. So, and I should importantly, Keay, add, I'm a woman, and so I have experienced this female hormone odyssey from a personal point of view, and also I'm very I'm passionate. I'm an active person. I enjoy all sorts of activities, sports, swimming, tennis, etc. But I guess my main passion is ballet, dancing, which I've done since a very young age. And so also I've got a slightly different way of looking at things, because as a dancer, we put steps together, things make sense. And that's how I kind of look at the, this hormone story that we're going to discuss.
And which I'll just add, because you've written a book called Hormones, Health and Human Performance, and you deliver that book in that format, don't you? Talk about scenes. It's about a dance, and that's what I find absolutely fascinating. I think you're doing that really well. So you're explaining things. It's almost like a dance. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's I think
Well, absolutely.
think that.
Hormones are beautiful, but also, I prefer stories. So, I can deliver dry, medical papers, very academic things. Sure, I can do that, but to communicate with people, that's obviously not really going to communicate the information that they need to know, right? What do they need to know? Not the really, really fine nitty gritty, but the principles, what's going on. And then I always think it's those practical strategies. What can you do yourself through lifestyle rather than having to immediately think, oh, I've got to take the latest supplement, medication, whatever it might be. There are lots of things you can do yourself, and that makes you feel really good, because then you feel, okay, I'm really making a positive steps myself.
So you're going to be the narrator of this story. I'm just going to kind of direct it in terms of bring you along the line. So we need to get to know the narrator a little bit more. So why did you go into to be a doctor? Why medical doctor? And what was the transition for you to then kind of go off on your own, if you like, and go more like performance side of things? Because I do talk about this a lot with people, and I think, look, you've got the medical side of stuff, you've got the performance side of stuff. If we can focus on performance, we can be better humans, and we can reduce medication, we can help ourselves and perform better. So what was that? What started you off as a doctor, and what was that transition?
Well, as a youngster, as a teenager, I was doing my ballet practices, doing my swimming competitions. As I said, I was very enjoyed doing all these activities, exercising, but it was sort of curious to me. I wondered, I knew instinctively, we all know, if you go and you do your exercise, I go to do my ballet classes, and why am I doing this? Yes, I'm enjoying it, but I'm doing it in the expectation and the hope that I will improve. But then it puzzled me. It's like, I wonder how that's actually happening, what's happening inside my body. And so that led me to, well, number one, wanted to find out. So it's kind of study medicine, what's going on inside. And then specifically coming back, like you say, to that performance potential. What is it about that's so great about exercise and the right balance with nutrition? What is it exactly that supports what Hippocrates says 2,000 years ago? This guy was onto something. He said, if we could give every individual just the right amount of nourishment, just the right amount of exercise, not too little, not too much, we'd have found the surest way to health. And we kind of all know that. That's sort of common sense. But the thing that fascinated me was, why is that correct? Why is that right? Because I always want to know the why, because then I'm more likely to do it, because I want to understand why. And then the answer came in the form of hormones as I, went on studying medicine in more detail, specializing specifically in hormones, because I realized that these were the key. These were the key to driving the adaptations to what we do on the outside. The hormones are working really, really hard on the inside to help us, improve our performance, improve our health. So that's really what led me down that path. But in order to be sitting here talking to you today about this, medicine, number one, studying medicine is quite a slog. It's long. There's lots of theory, practical stuff, and then you have to sort of, get all that experience, cut your teeth, as it were, working. I'm a hospital doctor, so working various hospitals, doing research. I did a research many years ago looking at an anti-doping test for athletes cheating with growth hormone. By the way, some unscrupulous athletes, they know how important hormones are for performance. 75% of the doping infringements are with hormones, by the way. That's not an advert to go and dope, by the way, but I'm just pointing it out. The hormones are really, really powerful things. And so that's sort of what led me on this this trajectory to try and give this information like we're doing now. Let's discuss with everybody hormones.
Could you just quickly describe, so I know my people who listen and said, okay, I've heard of hormones, but can you give like an analogy of what actually hormones are? Like, what do these things do?
Good point. Yeah, we should define what is a hormone. A hormone is it's an internal chemical messenger, and hormones are transported in the bloodstream. That's great, by the way, because if you go in the bloodstream, you can get to every single cell in the body. So including your brain, right down to your toe tips, so that's number one. Hormones are there, whizzing around in your bloodstream. Now, what do they actually do? The clue comes from the derivation of the word hormone from ancient Greek, meaning setting in motion. And that's what the hormone does. When a hormone arrives at a cell in the bloodstream, it goes into the cell, goes to the cell nucleus where the DNA resides. People know, hopefully, DNA, it's the blueprint for life. But have you ever wondered, how does that sort of kind of boring instruction, it's like a computer code almost, how does that come to life? How does that make a body and improve our muscles when we go and do strength training, whatever? Like what? How does that work? And the answer is the hormones. The hormones set in motion the DNA. They direct the expression of DNA, tell the DNA, right, please make some muscle proteins now because this person's just gone and, done this exercise. And so actually we need to respond to this stimulus. So the hormone goes and says, right, make more muscle proteins. So hormones are messengers, but that's just saying how they get around. But hormones are messengers and they direct the expression of DNA. They help us make that thing I was searching for. I wanted to know, how did exercise translate at the end to improvement in your performance? And the missing link is inside your hormones. They're driving those changes.
Brilliant. Look at the way you put that. So now we kind of know what hormones are. I want to bring a little bit of fire into this. What lights your fire for this mission? Like what do you see getting done wrong? Because there's always something that really kind of triggers us and motivates us to make a difference. What is your big, strong why? What do you see getting done wrong that you'd like to change when it comes to women's health and performance?
Well, I think that, number one, there's a big negative narrative, I feel, about women's hormones. I mean, the moment we say, oh, women's hormones, it sometimes has a bit of a negative thing. And, oh, women are hormonal and all this sort of stuff. But I want to remind women that Horme is the goddess of effort, energy, and action via these female hormones of the menstrual cycle, for example. So if you're ever, accused of being hormonal, please take that as a compliment, ladies. You're being compared to a goddess of effort, energy, and action. So that's my first thing. Let's get rid of this negative thing about, oh, periods are really dreadful and everything. Yeah, it's a physical sign, a period. Actually, that's a very good training metric, by the way. It's a barometer of your internal healthy hormones. Your body's saying to you, it's okay, things are working all right. So number one, let's get rid of this negative narrative and remember that they're powerhouses for you. So that's my first mission. But the other thing that also, frankly, annoys me a lot is when people blame their hormones. Oh, I've got a hormone imbalance, and that's why the naughty hormones. It's like, no, the hormones simply respond to what you do. With all due respect, it's probably an imbalance in what you're doing. Like Hippocrates said, it's an imbalance in your nutrition, your exercise. You haven't got quite enough sleep, probably I'd throw in there as well, stress management. You're either under or over exercising, like Hippocrates said, too little, too much. So those are my two messages. Let's get rid of this negative stuff about female hormones. They're brilliant. They're amazing. Goddess of effort, energy, and action. And secondly, let's not blame hormones. Hormones have had millions of years of evolution. They know what to do. If you treat them nicely and you give them, a good balance of inputs, that's where the balance comes in. But this is also positive. All of this is positive. What I'm trying to say, this is all positive. You have control and you need to, be happy about your hormones. And that, by the way, how you think about this makes a heck of a difference.
Cool. And that's hopefully what we're going to kind of cover now, so people can actually think of this in a completely different way. So can you just give us a quick overview of the Female Odyssey? And then what we do is we then dive into each stage of it. So I've got 3 stages of these. But if you can give us a quick overview, and I would dive into each stage of it.
Sure, Keir. So as a young girl, we're talking specifically, I should say, we're talking specifically about female hormones. So we're going to just talk specifically. I mean, by the way, there are many hormone systems. We'll probably chuck a few in as we go, but just to be clear, the Female Hormone Odyssey, we can't, this isn't going to last all day. So we're talking specifically about the hormones that the ovaries make, and the ovaries make 2 main hormones. estrogen, and the most active form is estradiol, and progesterone. Okay, so those are the two key hormones that the ovaries make. But as a girl, the ovaries aren't doing anything, they're asleep. Okay, so these hormones are very low levels, we all know. And then what happens as the girl puberty kicks in, then her periods will start. We all know that. Okay, and what's happening there? That's because the ovaries have been woken up. Okay, and so the ovaries start producing estrogen and progesterone in a cyclical manner, hence the menstrual cycle. And so periods are an external sign that these hormones are doing their beautiful hormone dance of the menstrual cycle. But we all know during those teenage years, the periods can be a little bit, it takes a little bit of time. It's like tuning an orchestra, okay? It takes a little bit of time. It could be a little bit of a mess at first, but then it will hopefully get into a nice pattern. Then we have the menstruating years for the woman. The woman will hopefully be having these regular hormone dances of the menstrual cycle. She might get pregnant, and of course then that changes yet again. The placenta will take over and produce big amounts, continuous high levels of estrogen and progesterone. We all know you don't get periods when you're pregnant, right? That's why, because of those. But equally, the hormones could go down back to childlike levels if she hasn't got the right balance of her exercise and nutrition, overdoing it in terms of exercise and not fueling sufficiently, or if you take hormonal contraceptions. Most types squash all the hormones flat. That's why they're very effective contraception, by the way, but they squash all the hormones flat to childlike levels. And then the sort of big finale for the Female Hormone Odyssey is the ovaries. They've been working hard all this time, from the age of, say, 12 to typically around 51. And so, now we're talking menopause, so the ovaries retire. Menopause is when periods stop. That's what the word means, menopause. And the ovaries retire. But there is a little bit of a tricky time when the ovaries are going part-time. In the lead up to menopause, when the ovaries officially shut shop, there's the perimenopause, which is a bit like, by the way, when you're a teenager, because it's like a little bit out of sync. This beautiful hormone dance goes a little bit awry, which is why women experience, menopausal symptoms, hot flushes, etc., which we'll discuss. And then after menopause has happened, then then the estrogen and progesterone go back down to those low childlike levels. So there's a lovely trajectory of how the two main ovarian hormones change over the Female Hormone Odyssey.
So which I'm actually going to put up on here. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to put a little image up. I'm going to use Dr. Nicky's slide of the female hormones. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually see this, because it is fascinating when you look at it, and it makes so much sense. So that's kind of the overview of the Female Odyssey. So we'll kind of jump into like what happens at different stages. Can we first, because you mentioned both estrogen and progesterone, can you kind of tell us what those two hormones, why they're important, and why should women really why should they know about these hormones?
Because these two hormones are what we call sex steroid hormones. So there are various types of hormones. They could be made from proteins, that's like growth hormone, or they could be these steroid hormones. I mean, you don't necessarily have to know that, but it's just, if you look at the picture, and I've got some pictures of what the molecule looks like, it's beautiful, right? It's got lots of rings on it. Anyway, that's kind of what they look like. And the reason why these two hormones are so important, these are the ones that drive those changes, the goddess of effort, energy, and action. These embody that goddess, right? So,
Two
for example, absolutely, these are the really amazing hormones. And I could give you a whole list of things they do, but I would probably narrow it down to these categories. The first thing that these hormones are super important for is the musculoskeletal system, so bone and muscles and tendons, ligaments, etc. Bone especially. Estrogen, or estradiol, most active form, that is the queen hormone for bone health. Even in men have to convert some of their testosterone to estrogen. That's amazing, queen. So that is absolutely brilliant. And this would now explain, by the way, we know that osteoporosis, weak bones, brittle bones, That's why, 1 in 2 menopausal women get osteoporosis, because their hormones have gone very low. So very important for bone health, also for muscle. We know that in women whose periods stop when they shouldn't, during those menstruating years, they're a big risk of bone stress injuries and of soft tissue injuries. So that's one big area that these hormones are important for. Another super important area here is the cardiovascular system, so the heart and the blood vessels. And we know once again that these hormones are super important, especially that estrogen, for getting a good cholesterol profile, okay? And the reactivity of the arteries themselves are controlled by estrogen. And once again, the evidence we have is when you are in menopause and the hormones are very low, the main cause of death in menopausal women, it's not breast cancer, it's cardiovascular disease, because these hormones are cardioprotective, exactly, and for metabolism in general. Another area I want to mention is sort of mood and the nervous system, okay? So again, we have evidence, we know that in women whose periods stop when we don't expect them to, so in their 20s, 30s, studies show that they have a slower reaction time and lower peak power production. So, these hormones are important for transmitting those messages. And also, we all know that if your hormones, another symptom of menopause, when the hormones go low, it can affect how you think, your cognitive function, brain fog can occur. So these hormones are really important for the brain as well. I can carry on with this list, by the way, but I think that those are the sort of top ones. So these hormones are very, very important for so many aspects of our health.
Granted, just a quick overview so people can say, so, okay, that's what they're responsible for. That's why these are important. Because especially when I touch on, because what we're talking about now is the age of the athlete. So this is, I would say, the age of the athlete between maybe 12 to 35. So these are when you're going to be in your sport performance. Young girls are going to be doing sports. And I'm going to use an example here of a young girl that we have in the gym. Because what happens, and you mentioned this before, when young girls first start the periods, so estrogen goes up quite sporadically, and they can get really heavy bleeding, a lot of pain, a lot of cramps. The young girl in particular, she actually got loads of swelling on her face, and she was told by the doctor that she was allergic to her hormones. And it seemed quite coincidental when I was learning about all this stuff myself, or how those rapid rises of estrogen go up, but progesterone doesn't quite catch up. So you've got those almost. Is that what happens? Is that why young girls really struggle? And what happens after that? Does that level out?
Exactly. So that's exactly what happens here. So, if you look at what the fluctuations of the hormones do over a menstrual cycle, it's the most beautiful hormone choreography in the body, full stop. But if you look at it, it's like, wow, that's really, the timing, the interaction between the estrogen goes high, and then we ovulate, and then the estrogen and progesterone should go high. It's like a quarter ballet, right? I don't know if anyone has watched a ballet, it's quite complicated, or any dance, in fact. The dancers in certain places at certain times, and, you don't see any dancers crashing into each other on stage, do you? But that might have happened in the dress rehearsals, by the way, right? Right. So that's what's happening when the menstrual cycle is first kicking in. There's a bit of discoordination, like tuning of the orchestra, like rehearsing things. And so typically, exactly as you say, what happens initially is the estrogen actually is quite good. It gets into action straight away. But the progesterone and progesterone is produced as a result of ovulation. So the ovulation and getting that bit of the cycle sorted out, or, fine-tuned, takes a few dress rehearsals. And so this is precisely why teenagers often, as you said, have heavier bleeding, because estrogen is the hormone that thickens the endometrial lining, the lining of the uterus. So you've got more to shed, so it's heavy. And if you've got a lot to shed, it's painful, because the body needs to contract to get rid of it. So there's a little bit of not quite perfect timing during those teenage years. And listen, the thing is, that's what I mean about the negative narrative can start at that point. And I understand why. It's like, oh gosh, this is awful, da, 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 da. And often the reflex reaction is, oh, I know, I'll take the pill, the contraceptive pill. That will regulate my periods. I just want to be clear. I know we're going to mention it probably in more detail later, but The contraceptive pill, it doesn't regulate periods. It stops them. It squashes all the hormones flat. Hopefully you can put that diagram here in the notes so people can see, appreciate the brutal hormone choreography. This is what happens. And then this is what it looks like when you're on the pill. It looks very boring. Everything's squashed flat. So it's true, it will alleviate temporarily maybe some symptoms, but it's, you know, you kind of like have to give the body a chance to do these dress rehearsals. So of course I don't want youngsters to suffer and be in pain, but explaining this to them, look, let's just see, let's do some you know, positive things, let's do some exercise, and you would direct them with that care. Let's make sure you're, you know, well hydrated. Let's do some things to try and help you over this problematic bit and see how it goes. If it really doesn't settle down, sure, we'll revisit, see, whatever. But often it just takes that little bit of nurturing approach and understanding that this is a warm-up stage.
So I love how we put that how it's kind of like a warm stage, like a dress rehearsal. So if say like a man was listening to this now, and she's saying, "Oh, my daughter's going through this stage now, and she's got a lot of pain." So exercise, lifestyle strategies are really going to help.
Yes, there's studies to show that. There's studies to show just on that exercise bit. I do understand if you're in pain, you just want to curl up, you don't do anything. But actually, there are good studies to show when you are suffering with period pain, actually doing some exercise, light. Obviously, I'm not saying you go off and run a marathon, you know, but you do some, you know, gentle stretching, things that elongate the body. I used to find swimming is very helpful. So, you know, trying to do some sort of movement to get everything moving, and, you know, your diet, trying to eat in a regular fashion, keeping well hydrated, keeping your iron intake up. You know, there are simple things. If you are a mother, you know, and you can see your daughter is suffering, of course, you want to help her, but actually giving her that advice and support and understanding, and saying, look, let's try this. But don't worry, I'm listening to you. I'm not denying that you are struggling, you are in pain, but let's work together to try and see how this goes. And sure, if we really can't sort it out, then, you know, then potentially that's when maybe medication would be helpful. But I think, you know, just, you know, being supportive during that phase, that's actually more important than anything. And having that understanding and knowledge, look, this is the dress rehearsal. It's going to be a bit messy, right? I will warm up, but hopefully we'll get there.
And how long do you think that period would last? Like roughly? I mean, is there like an estimate, like 2 years, 6 months? Is it kind of
it really varies from individual to individual, but it could be like a year or something. I mean, until the thing absolutely totally fine tunes, it could be even longer than that. But in terms of the symptoms you're experiencing and the heavy bleeding, that will sort of hopefully settle down. But yeah, again, setting a time limit and deciding, right, okay, we're going to check in and see how it is after 6 months. Has it got a little bit better? That's the thing. You know, is it improving? At least we're on the right track, even if it's not fully there. But having said all of this, if it really is actually getting worse or not resolving, then of course, I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying people have to suffer for years and years. You should go and speak with your GP, because potentially even youngsters, it's rare, but can have things like endometriosis, which is a condition that causes very heavy and painful periods. So there might be, but it's rarer, I have to say. I think most people, it'll be very unusual. I've yet to find somebody that said, oh, my periods just started like that, totally like clockwork, no problems at all. It's like, that's more the exception than the rule, I think.
But the outliers.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's just for the parents, to me, it's just a case of, look, go to the doctor, see, prepare you, like, what this is for really is to go and ask better questions, as opposed to taking the daughter, it's just started a period, she's getting pains, okay, there's a contraceptive pill. This will help.
No, exactly. Explore other options first. Exactly. Yeah.
So now we've kind of gone through that sort of period there, no pun intended, and now kind of everything started to regulate. What do you see getting done a lot when it comes to women or young girls who are in sports? I know you're big on REDS. So could you like tell us what that's about and what maybe parents can watch out for the young daughters, especially? And tell us a little bit about REDS and why that's an issue.
So REDS stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. I would put, and sport has been now made lowercase sport thing, because it's not, oh, you don't have to be in competitive sport to have REDS, by the way. It's relative energy deficiency, which means that, relatively speaking, you're not eating sufficient to fuel your energy demands. So if you lie in bed all day, you actually need still quite a lot of energy to keep your body going, just to keep the hormones ticking over, to do the beautiful hormone choreography of the menstrual cycle. You need a lot of energy just lying in bed, not doing anything. But then now we add on the extra energy demand of doing exercise, activity, a sport, whatever it is. So the body will need, that extra bit of energy to cover that demand. And so if the person, and by the way, for these youngsters, of course, they're also growing and developing, getting the hormone. This all takes energy, these hormones, to have their choreography to support the previous growth spurt. And also if they're at school, by the way, they'll be doing school activities, they're walking around the school to classes, you know what I mean? There's a lot of extra stuff. And by the way, the brain takes 20% of your energy intake. Wow, it's really greedy organ. And guess what? At school, well, hopefully you're using your brain a lot. So these youngsters have a big, high energy demand, even if they're not doing sport. Now add on the energy demand of sport, and you can see it's a lot, right? Especially I find a lot of youngsters are doing maybe sport in school, and they're in the school team and doing competitions for school, but also because they're good at whatever the sport is, I know, swimming or running or whatever it is, they're also doing training sessions and competitions outside of school with the club. So they've got a really high energy demand from their exercise, plus all the other ones we've mentioned. So what happens is then, relatively speaking, they might be in energy deficiency. Even if they're eating a reasonable amount, they're doing so much that it's like a bank account. Basically, they're in overdraft, right? And if you are in that situation of energy deficiency, the body quite sensibly will respond and say, we need to economize, we need to save energy. When you're driving your car and the gauge shows low, what do? You drive more slowly until you get to the next petrol station. So the body slows everything down. And this is a problem because it might save energy. The body might realize it's a good way of saving energy by switching off the menstrual cycle, because it takes a lot of effort to do that beautiful hormone choreography, lots of energy to make these hormones, etc. So this is the concern for these youngsters. And, I don't want to dampen youngsters doing exercise and sport, and especially the girls, absolutely, that's brilliant. But actually, they're in this time when they've got such a high energy demand already. It's just a case of, really making sure everything is balanced relative for what they want to do with their body. Because if you're in this, if you do develop REDS, so low energy availability over a long period of time, your periods will stop. We've already spoken how amazing these hormones are for many aspects of health, in particular the bone health, when the bones will be increasing their bone mineral density. So, it might not happen immediately, like they won't get a stress fracture the next day, but, they will, and they might perform reasonably well for a year or so, but then the wheels will start to fall off, literally. If the body is in economy mode, you just can't sustain that. And so that's really sad to see. So again, supporting, this youngster, and that's a lot of my work with the parent. We have a chat and it's like, this is amazing. You're doing all this training. You're so dedicated and it's brilliant, but you do need a rest day. You're actually overdoing it, and actually you're not fueling sufficiently. So it's just a case of rebalancing things.
Cool, because I haven't seen a lot of this in young athletes. Like me training young athletes is quite new to me over the last couple of years. I've always been more on the older side with women, so sort of women sort of 30 plus. There was a girl who I was coaching a long time ago now, and I worked out, she was a runner. She was going to work. She was a parent. She had a lot going on in her life, but she was running like 7 to 10 miles every single day. She was consuming 700 calories a day. Wow. I worked out she needed approximately 3,000 because of her levels of activity. And she was in a very, very bad state. I mean, like a very bad state. Her skin was terrible, inflamed. I don't know what was going on in the area of her body, but she was really focused on body image. So what do you think do you think body image plays a big part in this? In athletes and in women who were trying to lose weight?
Exactly. Well, I mean, by the way, 700 calories that wouldn't even be enough to keep you healthy lying in bed all day, by the way. Anyway, so but that's really interesting. These are sort of figures we're talking about. I mean, I don't particularly encourage people to track calories because it becomes an obsessive thing in its own right. But the thing is just, regular meals, good portions of carbohydrates are seen as this evil thing. And so going back to your comment about body image, I mean, there's one scenario where the person just doesn't realize they're a youngster, they're rushing around, or an individual rushing around doing all this stuff. They just didn't have time or didn't realize how much energy they need to do all this to a really high standard, good quality. But there is the other situation where intentionally the person might be concerned about their body image and intentionally restrict what they're eating. And so, that's, I'm really upset to see this, and I'm afraid I do blame social media, posts that are unrealistic that youngsters are looking at. I mean, I'm very old, so in our day we didn't even have the internet or social media, and in some ways that was great because we weren't influenced. I wasn't even aware. Of course I knew my school group, I knew my dance group, my whatever. So, but other than that, we weren't bombarded constantly by, oh, you got to look this way. And by the way, as we know, lots of these images of people or models or whoever they are, influencers, as I call them, they're, Photoshop, so they're not real, So then, but women get, or men even, but you think, oh gosh, I want to look like that. I'm going to reduce what I'm eating. I'm going to do too much. So I'm afraid we are putting so much emphasis on the way we look and our weight. Weight is just a measurement of gravity on scales. But that doesn't really tell you anything about who you are as a person. Your value as a person, your qualities, they're not measured by how many kilos on the scale. They're not measured by, oh, what's your waist measurement? It's crazy, but we put too much emphasis on this superficial stuff rather than actually who we are. But it's difficult especially when you're a youngster, to have that confidence, to be strong and say, look, I am who I am, and your body is changing. Obviously, as a teenager, you do. As a woman, you will be putting on fat. Look different to what you did when you were, 10, right? And sometimes that's uncomfortable, and challenging and all that sort of thing. But I just want to really make the point that please try not to be diverted by these superficial things, measurements of, how good you are. How good you are is you, not this physical stuff. Okay. And it's more important, your health and your enjoyment of life, because these people who are under fueling are miserable, I can tell you, so you've got to enjoy life as well,
So as parents, we kind of think about, okay, my daughter's playing sport. I do get this quite a lot, actually. People ask me and say, how do I know if she's actually eating enough? And how do I encourage her to eat more food? Because like you say, social media, you should be in a calorie deficit if you want to lose weight. All of these everything's about how we look, how we should be, but there's no context to it. So for parents, it's very difficult. I'm a parent, I know how hard it is. What advice could you give them? How is my daughter fueling? How do I know if my daughter's fueling enough? And how can I then support her maybe to eat more?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know exactly these problems and challenges, as a parent. I've got 2 boys actually, but anyway, so it wasn't, but still, as I say, we're all susceptible to it, especially if you're at that self-conscious age of, your body's changing. So I think the general principles that we all know instinctively. Like my grandmother used to say, breakfast is a really important meal because it breaks your fast. So the things you can do, make sure that your daughter is eating is having breakfast. I always have, I'm in a rush, don't have time. I'm sorry, I don't accept that. I used to have to be poolside every morning, 6 a.m., ready, changed to swim every day of the week. So I had to get up at 5:15 to eat a small breakfast, do my session, then I refueled afterwards. So breakfast is an absolute must with protein and complex carbohydrate. Complex carbohydrate, cereals, bread, pasta, potatoes. These are not evil foods. They're an essential food group that you use for quality exercise. So what I would encourage is make sure your daughter is having regular meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And ideally, if you can eyeball, they are eating it. You know what I mean? And the portion size. Oh yeah, I had lunch, lunch enough for a sparrow. So try and you know, just gently encourage. The regular meals are really, really super important. And then if they are doing training, then, you know, don't take them to a training session. Normally parents are the chauffeurs, right? So actually this is good, because then we kind of can support, if you're the chauffeur, make sure that they're eating a banana or something on the way to taking them to their training session. If it's a very long training session, more than an hour, make sure again, you can be helpful and give them, you know, I would use 2 water bottles. One, I would have an electrolyte tablet in, okay, with water, and the other one I would have fruit juice. That's a sports drink. That's a cheap sports drink, by the way. So a little bit of carbohydrate to top up, and then you can be really helpful afterwards, the moment they've finished their training, that they have some recovery fueling. So something like a banana milkshake. So basically carbohydrate and protein in the ratio 3:1. And then you're going to take them home, probably, because we are chauffeurs. And then they're going to have their shower, and then they're going to sit down for dinner. So I think if you follow those general principles of regular meals, fueling either side of training and maybe even during training, and as they get older and they take themselves to training, they'll already got in the habit of doing this. So when my son got old enough to take himself, thank goodness, on the train to training, I didn't have to drive him. You know, before he left, I would hand him a banana to eat. And also he would make sure he's got his bottles, and then he's got a snack to have on the train on the way back before, and then he'll come home and I'll give him dinner. So I think as parents, it's just, you know, helping with the logistics, you know, in that way can be really helpful.
Brilliant. I love that, because then you broke that down so simply. So you have 3 square meals a day, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, balanced meals, don't overcomplicate it. And then you just train around the workout windows. If you're training that day, some carbohydrates and a bit of protein before you start the training, and then afterwards, same, a little bit of...
Yeah, exactly. So, and anything to top up during. And yeah, you can spend a lot of money on all these sports nutrition products, but my advice is just keep it simple. And the banana is really great for complex carbohydrate. Milk is excellent for protein, so that's why I said banana milkshake recovery drink. And the sports drink during, fruit juice. That's like simple carbohydrate. So again, just keeping it simple and within budget, you know, that's really the best way to go.
That you've actually touched on a point there, because I was at the shop the other day, and it was Messi's brought an electrolyte drink out, and lovely colourful bottle. It was pink, and there's a blue one, and there's another coloured one, and £2.50 it costs. £2.50. So I literally bought it because I'm going to do a video on it. And all it's in it is salts, which you can put some sea salt in some water, and some sugar. Okay, so a little bit of orange juice in with a little bit of electrolyte, or like you say, just water with a little bit of electrolyte.
Yeah, well, I would say I have so fruit juice, definitely. You can have that undiluted. That's your carbohydrate. And then for the electrolyte, you can buy relatively cheaply, you know, electro tabs. Right, and you just plonk one of those in the water, and it gives the water a more pleasant taste as well. So, and because you mentioned salt, it's like that. It's a bit horrible. But so I would actually say tube, and you just put one of these in a water bottle, you know, and they're different flavors, and they're quite good. They haven't got any calories in, but they have got the electrolytes. So you've got the electrolyte bottle, and then you've got the fruit juice bottle, which is the fueling up, topping up bottle. But you see, these are just simple things. You can get bamboozled again with all the sports products, blah blah blah. But honestly, please save your money. And also, it's more satisfying if you make it yourself, or you know what's in it, because you never know, they might put in sort of you know, preservatives and stuff like that. And you know, so I think just keeping it simple and straightforward and within budget, those are the key things.
Cool. Brilliant. So we're going to just bring on to the age of the warrior now. So this is kind of sort of 35, 55. And a big thing that I see kind of this stage of life, when everything becomes really busy. Kids, career, business, trying to keep on top of your fitness. So as a young age, you have basically the stresses of school and competing in sports. And as you kind of get older, you've got life, kids, all that type of thing. And one of the things that I see, mostly just because of the industry that I've been in, is burnout, specifically. What role is, like, what is burnout in terms of, we're talking about from the hormonal perspective? How does that happen?
Well, first of all, again, this is understanding people. We're not sort of pointing the finger at people. We're just saying, look, life is busy. You have a lot going on. So sort of burnout as a general term. I mean, sort of breaking it down, there could be the red situation
Mhm.
where the like you already mentioned, as somebody in their 30s, just frankly wasn't eating enough, or just just doing so much expenditure of energy, not meeting their demand. So reds is definitely a thing, and the periods would become irregular or even stop. So that's one thing to look out for. But also just generally, if you've got a lot going on, often your sleep will be disrupted. So even if you're fueling sufficiently, even if you're eating enough, if you're not giving your body a total rest day from exercise and everything and just chilling, that, that is sort of the extra mental stress and stress management. And that often manifests itself in disrupting your sleep. And once your sleep gets disrupted, sleep is the chief nourisher in life's great feast. And that's because when you're asleep, lots of these hormones we're talking about, they spring into action and work your magic. You actually get fitter when you're asleep. So you can see if your sleep is disrupted because you're burning the candle at both ends, the usual sort of thing, doing things last minute at night, looking at mobile and electronic devices which emit a type of wavelength of light that disrupts the production of the sleep hormone melatonin. The content, your mind is buzzing as you're going to bed, worrying about something. So I think just take a step back. Are you actually pushing yourself too much? Are you trying to pack in too much? Is your nutrition not good, or is your recovery not good, or your downtime? Okay, so we talk about people can overtrain. I would say rather than overtrain, I would say under recover.
Mhm.
So don't forget that when you're not doing anything, don't feel guilty or bad. That's good. Your body needs time. The hormones need time to drive those adaptations, to drive the expression of DNA. So you need that time and that space. And in terms of, when you feel overwhelmed, like, oh gosh, I've got so many things to do, it's just like, take a breath. My advice, what I do is I make a list. This is the priority. These are the priority things I have to do. But actually, some of the other things you have on your list, actually, maybe it would be better if I can put that to tomorrow or whatever. So I think we try and get everything done, especially as women. We do have trying to juggle so many things, uh, probably got a job, trying to exercise ourselves, and, trying to, child management, as it were, chauffeuring duties, whatever it is, getting the sports kit ready. There are so many pulls that actually sometimes we're pulling ourselves in so many directions and we actually haven't got the time for ourselves. So don't feel guilty or selfish or any of those things if actually you say, no, I can't do that today, or it's not a priority. I'm going to put it to another day, and these are my priorities. And actually one of the priorities put high up is having some relaxation time, whatever form that looks like for you.
So do you think, like, from a woman's perspective, because obviously when women are pregnant, oxytocin levels go up. So does that change, like, the brain state in terms of become more like mothering? And then is that why women feel like they have to do more around the house and make sure the kids are sorted more so than a guy does? By the way, I'm not saying guys don't do this, because I certainly do that, but especially my wife is always on the go. Is that something that
Yeah,
can
exactly. I think it is. Yeah, I mean, yeah, listen, my husband is very supportive, and he was really great. And he was the one that said, look, I'll look after the babies as they were, or children, while you go and do your bath. So I know that we're not having a dig at men. I know there are men that are supportive and encourage the women to do their thing and whatever. So we're not having a go at that. But I think as women, you're right, it is to do with the hormones. And oxytocin is that attachment thing with your child. And also, well, I suppose this is something about the difference between men and women. We've gone to all the effort of being pregnant for 9 months. You know what I mean? It's like we've not only are the hormones, but actually physically, you've put a lot of effort into this, and you've gone through, frankly, a lot of pain. and you know what I mean, for birth. And if you're breastfeeding them, that's when oxytocin is released, so you get more bonding. So it's natural, it's instinctive. If you are feeling, that's what I meant about don't feel guilty. Of course, you're going to do the best you absolutely can. No one would question that, right? But you can only do the best job you can if you are yourself healthy and as sort of de-stressed as possible. So that's what the point I'm trying to make. Okay. Yeah. No one's going to doubt, and don't doubt yourself, that you are going to do the best job you can. Of course you are, but you can only do that if you are like in your best space as well. So you have to take some time for you to help support your hormones,
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, when I've always coached from in the past, it's always, especially at that age when they've got kids, it's like, we really want to make your recovery the most important thing. Yes, training, we need to do this. Of course, we need to do that. That's really important. Like going to the gym, whatever that is that you're kind of doing. But really, we really want to get this recovery because you're taking all of these things on board, kids, career, like whatever it is.
Yep.
We need to bring those cortisol levels back down, especially around bedtime. Which brings to my next question. And I did ask you this at the talk, because it was one of the things I was like, well, I need to ask Dr. Nicky this. What's your thoughts on perimenopausal women? So we're talking about maybe a woman who's going through perimenopause or just before then when the hormones do start declining, about doing like these high energy exercise classes. Now, when I say high energy exercise classes, what I'm talking about is things like boot camps where there's no strength progression. It's just basically a sweat fest to burn calories. Like, what's your around that?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a hormone there, cortisol. So cortisol is stress response hormone. And the body doesn't distinguish the source of stress, by the way. So, it could be the stress from doing this boot camp or whatever it is, or it could be, stress from any other source, work stress, family stress, whatever. Anyway, cortisol, I mean, again, it's not a bad hormone. So, hormones aren't good or bad. It depends on the level and they're just responding. So again, don't blame them. So what will happen if you put yourself in this stressful situation, say, for example, of a sweat fest, as you put it, I like that, right? The cortisol will definitely go high. Of course, it's meant to. But the thing is, a problem about cortisol is that if it goes high and more specifically sort of stays high, because cortisol will go high in the morning to give you the awakening response it's meant to, and then it should sort of decline a bit during the day. But if it goes high, and it will go even higher, by the way, if you don't have breakfast, and now you're going to do the boot camp, now it's like off the screen, it's really high. And the cortisol, the problem with that is that it's a catabolic hormone, it's a breaking down hormone. So estrogen is your anabolic hormone. It builds bones, builds muscles, builds stuff. But cortisol breaks it down. So you're going to be breaking down literally like tissues, and it has an effect on your metabolism. It tends to favor the deposition of fat because it's an emergency situation. So the body says, well, look, we do better just store some fat. And so it will, counteract any potential benefits you might gain from doing that type of exercise, because the cortisol will be so high that you'll be tending to put down fat rather than muscle. So it's all against what you're trying to do. You see what I mean? And cortisol also dampens down the other hormones. So when you're going through perimenopause, menopause, the hormones are fluctuating a bit like when you were a teenager, by the way, and it's a little bit tricky. And your body composition might be changing, and you might be getting frustrated and thinking, oh, we all want a quick fix, let's be honest. So you might be tempted to do this sweat fest boot camp. It's like, oh, I was going to burn loads of calories. You might be tempted, oh, look, this diet looks really good. Extreme diet, reducing to so many calories, So you go for extreme things, because you want the quick fix. You want to energy conservation mode, right? Down regulate your metabolism. And so
sorry, my internet just bottomed out there. Could you just pull that back just about 30 seconds?
So if you do if you go for the extremes, you do the boot camps, the sweat fest, and maybe you're restricting your calories as well, this will put your cortisol levels sky high and keep them there. And that will favor the deposition of fat, and prevent deposition of muscle. It's obviously bad. And also, if you're restricting what you're eating and putting stress on your body will downregulate your metabolic rate. So the net result is, initially you might think, oh, this is working, right? You might lose a little bit of weight, but then you'll get really frustrated because nothing else, it just plateaus because the body has adapted. Remember, the body adapts to what you do. And so then you get fed up and think, oh, well, I'll just go back to kind of like a more eating sufficiently. And then you'll be really unhappy because your weight will go up, right? Because the metabolism is down-regulated, the cortisol's high, so you know what I mean? So you end up in a worse position than you started with. So absolutely exercise and nutrition, like Hippocrates said, are crucial. I'm not denying that. But the thing is, if your hormones are changed, you have to change the sort of inputs of what you're doing. So rather than going for what you think is the quick fix, the easy fix, or not easy, but of the boot camps and the restriction, please, sure, do some cardiovascular exercise, but actually this is where the strength work really comes into play. Doing strength work that will increase your metabolic rate, okay? Burn the calories for you, right? And of course, doing strength work, as the name suggests, will encourage the deposition of fat. So, and avoid crazy diets, right? Please. Maybe a little bit, if you really truly need to lose weight, then sure. Ultimately, yes, you have to be in a very small, I emphasize that word, calorie deficit, not a big, massive one, because then that will really mess up your hormones. So yes, that's the answer to the question. Remember Hippocrates, keep things balanced and adjust them according to, your hormones have changed. You respect that. You are in sync with those.
So basically, we've got our fuel, like we said before, around the workout window. Proteins, carbohydrates, stop getting sucked into these crazy fad diets.
Oh, yeah.
Strength training, because that
absolutely
develops muscle, improves those anabolic hormones, strengthens the bones, does all those really cool things. And then obviously we're looking at recovery. So things like sleeping, not doing loads of high, stressful things that keeps those cortisol levels high for the rest of the day.
Exactly. Yeah, and sleep. My grandmother always used to say, "Oh, it's the hours of sleep you get before midnight." She was, by the way, my grandmother also was saying about breakfast, and I've already said that breakfast, she was right. And guess what? She's right about this sleep business as well. Because actually the peak production of the anabolic hormones, the bodybuilding ones, the estrogens, the growth hormone, that happens around about midnight or so. So absolutely getting to bed before midnight, and I suggest setting your alarm for bedtime rather than the morning, is a good idea. So sitting up late, or fiddling around doing things late, that's not a good idea. Try to get, I'm not a total party pooper. Of course, you want to go out once in a while, but, generally trying to keep your bedtime regular and as early as possible. That's going to be really helpful to support your hormones throughout your life, but particularly, as we say, when the hormones are changing.
I love that you mentioned sleep, because to me, sleep's where the magic happens, and that's it. I'm such a big advocate of sleep. I talk about it all the time, because it really is. When you go to sleep, everything just fixes. Like, you go into the gym, you're breaking your body down. Go to sleep, that fixes your body. Like, makes sleep a priority.
Yes, exactly. And then when I give my talks, actually, I talk about Hippocrates and the things we can do with the sleep, the nutrition, the exercise. And then the first thing I talk about is sleep. And I say, I know you're all going to be surprised and think that I'm going to talk straight about exercise and nutrition, but actually, if you haven't got that time for the hormones to work their magic, everything you do is going to you're not going to get the full benefit from it. So that actually, if you want to start somewhere, then that would definitely be somewhere to start, the first thing.
So to just start leading on to what you mentioned there about strength training and producing all those lovely anabolic hormones. I had a client, I'm saying I had a client, she was part of the gym when I had the gym. She was in her 60s. When she first started going to the gym, she was doing all of these high intensity classes. She was doing them for years and years and years. Never seen a change in her body. She ended up with low thyroid. She had hypothyroidism. She had another condition which begins with an S, and I can't remember what it's called. It's like
Sjogren's.
Yes, that's it. That's the one. She was. What is that, by the way? Is that?
By the way, it's an autoimmune disease. Autoimmune diseases in general are more common in women, especially as we get older. But anyway, Sjogren's is a weird one, where you get dry eyes and stuff like that. Anyway, but that was a good I'm pleased I had something beginning with S. There you go. Anyway.
She was overweight. She was really unwell. She had arthritis. She had rheumatoid arthritis. She started strength training, and that was the only thing she did. Then she started listening to her body a little bit. She started sleeping a bit better. She started eating a bit more protein. And 5 years, 7 years later, I think it was 5 or 7 years later, she won the British Power Masters competition.
Wow.
I've got a video. There's a video on YouTube. But anyway, all she did was she just started strength training. She stopped doing all this high intensity stuff.
Yep.
And she went and started doing strength training, start loving it, start getting stronger. So how does that, for perimenopausal or menopause, she was menopause, she'd gone through where she was actually, what are the changes in menopause, and what women then maybe need to do to change things up a bit? So we've gone through that whole perimenopausal period where you were saying before, where in semi-retirement. Yeah. What menopause, so in menopause, after menopause, what do we really need to focus on? What does the lifestyle look like? Or how could you advise them there?
Well, yeah, well, I mean, your story kind of really illustrates that. So after the ovaries are retired, so the estrogen and progesterone will be low because the ovaries have retired. So those are low. And remember, we started at the very beginning here talking about how important these hormones are for bone health, mental health, cardiovascular health. So I'm afraid that, those, unless you're proactive about it, a cardiovascular disease, main killer, osteoporosis, 1 in 2 women post-menopause. So, these are the consequences of these hormones going low. The other hormone that goes low in men as well, by the way, is growth hormone. Okay, growth hormone declines, and that's another of these anabolic hormones. So yeah, it is a challenge. Your hormones are changed, okay? But don't give up hope. Your beautiful story, I think, really illustrates that perfectly, Keir. So what you need to do is just revise what you're doing, okay? So again, this is an opportunity. Again, people say, oh, negative, oh gosh, I don't get the same results as I did when I was 21 doing this. Of course not, because you're not 21 anymore and your hormones have changed. So, but don't take that in a negative way. Say, okay, fine. This is an opportunity for me to revise, refresh, look to do new things. Like you mentioned this client, this woman who started doing strength training and I loved it. So, look on it positively. So the key things are what we've really been kind of emphasizing, stressing, is with the exercise. I agree, people get sucked into this high intensity stuff. So definitely the strength training. Apart from your lovely example, we've got hard evidence that strength training is the key thing in terms of exercise. You still do your other bits and pieces. You still do your balancing, important if you want to prevent falls and prevent fractures. You still do some flexibility. You still do some cardio exercise, of course, but it's all about the emphasis. The emphasis changes more towards the strength training, because that is the best stimulus for the anabolic hormones. Remember, the anabolic hormones have gone low, so you want to give them the best fighting chance you can. It's like, come on, we're going to really try and encourage you to do the business still, okay? And we've got good evidence that this works, particularly bone health. In a lovely study where they had women who just went and did some sort of exercise non-specified, and the ones that did specific strength training, they improved their bone mineral density and they didn't lose height. So number one, exercise, strength training, absolutely. That needs to be prioritized. You mentioned the nutrition. We said don't do any crazy diets, please, and definitely more proportion of protein. So it's all about, you still keep the principles there, 3 regular meals, blah, 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 fuel your exercise, everything. But then you're looking to having more protein. When you look at your plate, there's more of it filled up with protein, because again, we need to give the lower levels of anabolic hormones a fighting chance. If you want more muscle rather than fat, you need to do the strength training, give the stimulus. You also need to give the building blocks. So that's the protein. And then again, like you said, the sleep. That's really important, because that's when the magic's going to work. So it's all the same we started with. There's all the same things. Those are the tools at your disposal. Those 3 choices, behaviors around the exercise, nutrition, and the recovery sleep. But the proportions, the emphasis changes according to your hormones changing. So in this, menopause phase, and by the way, you'll be spending, hopefully, you'll be spending at least a third of your life in menopause. So, I don't know about everyone else, but I want that third of my life, this third of my life, to be, as good as it can be. And so these are the tools at your disposal to make the most out of that time of your life, and be respectful that your hormones have changed and work with them, not against them.
Exactly that, isn't it? Just work with your body, listen to it. Exactly what I wanted this for, so people could identify different stages of their life and how they can adapt it. But it still falls back into those three key things that you were saying. It's just what you put in those buckets, really, isn't it?
Yep.
So there'll be other women kind of listening to it.
Exactly.
And one of the big things, there's a big talk about it on now, especially online, is about HRT. You mentioned before about when young girls take birth control, it suppresses the hormones. Now, that is down to progestins, is that correct?
Yes. So what's in well, maybe if we just sort of talk about the contraceptive pill, that's the thing most people are familiar with. So if you look at the pack, what's it got in it? It's got two hormones in which look very similar, something like estrogen and something sounding a bit like progesterone. But the thing that suppresses your own production is the type of progestogen. Progestogen, a bit confusing. Progesterone is like the family name at the top. And then underneath that, we have the real deal, progesterone, which you produce yourself. And then we have the synthetic lot, all progestins. And so what's put in the contraceptive pill are these sort of artificial ones, progestins. And those are the ones that are, they're sort of got a similarity because they're in the same family to progesterone, but they are obviously different. And those are the ones that cause the menstrual cycle to stop. And that's why they're very effective forms of contraceptions. Whereas HRT, hormone replacement therapy, that if you look at what you take when you take HRT, typically you will take some form of estrogen and some form of progestogen, okay, the family one. But probably if you're taking HRT and for menopause, then you have an option. You could still take a synthetic one, the progestin, or probably more preferable, the real thing, as it were, the progesterone. So the contraceptive pill and HRT, they're both got hormones in. They're both called forms of estrogen and form of progestogen, but because they're for very different reasons, of course, they're made of different things. So I think it's important that we point that out. They are different things. Of course they are, because they're for different purposes.
Yeah, I think it's just important is so people when they go to the doctors and they prescribe stuff, that they can ask better questions. Because I know you mentioned sort of micronized progesterone, which is the natural.
That's the real one.
It's the real one. So why would women then, because I've had the conversation with this with a few people, why would women then be prescribed? So a woman with a uterus, why would she be prescribed progestin over progesterone?
It is for menopause we're talking about, HRT.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, obviously, well, the first thing to say is every woman's choice. And so if you go in wanting HRT, it's your choice, but probably you would want to have the ones that are most, which are the same as what your own body produces, so molecularly identical. So probably you're going to go for estradiol, and the best way of taking that is through the skin, so patch or gel, and so we don't have to go through the liver and all that. So that's the estrogen bit of it, and then the progestogen bit, then the micronized progesterone, also trade name Utrogestan. You probably want to opt for that, and there's good studies to show that actually is really helpful for sleep, which is one of the main symptoms of menopause, by the way. So a study from my colleague in Canada showing even if you just take the micronized progesterone by itself, even it improves your sleep. So that seems the logical choice. However, there might be some women where actually the synthetic progestogen might be helpful. So for example, one of the symptoms of, well, it's more perimenopause, but leading up to menopause, the periods might become very heavy. Oh, by the way, a bit like a teenager, right? Because the hormones are fluctuating. And so sometimes something like the Mirena coil, which releases internally the uterus, a synthetic form of progestin, that actually, so there might be situations, to be fair, where you might actually say, well, you know what, this is better bleeding control if that were a problem. But if your periods have stopped, finished, then probably I would suggest, the micronized progesterone kind of makes more logical sense. A few women have a sort of a histamine reaction to that. And so again, that might be another sort of subgroup or specialist cases, specific situations where you might consider the synthetic things. But I think the main point is that if you're listening to this and you're a woman and you're going in and wanting to have HRT, have that discussion, again, knowing what the options are is really the key thing, so that you don't just get a prescription and think, well, what the heck is that? So you have some ideas of what might be suggested, what might be offered, and you can ask informed questions. If they say, oh, you can take these tablets, it's like, oh, hold on a minute. I thought that HRT was better when I take the estrogen through the skin. You see what I mean? So you can ask those informed questions so you feel confident and you understand what you're taking.
Really, I think that's key. That's like, don't go in and just take what you're given. Ask questions. Like, be curious. Like, you don't need just be curious and say, oh, what?
Absolutely, no, not rude, but being the informed patient, as I put it, I think, on the other side, as a doctor, I really, I think it's great. I mean, fortunately, I'm not a GP, so I know that GPs are very busy, but I'm always really delighted if people come and say, oh, I've read this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, fine, let's talk about it. Or, and also if you do go and see your GP, like I did, by the way, for my HRT, I know I'm a special case because I'm a doctor and I had done my research, but, I went in there feeling, the doctor, the GP was lovely. It's like, I sort of said, I want HRT and I've read that this is good. What do you think? What do you think? Sort of thing. And they were like, sure. And they were like, great. Someone's come in, they know what they want. It makes my job a lot easier. And I agree with them. It's like, great. So, exactly. Don't be rude. Just be informed and ask the questions if you need to, or make the suggestions yourself. And that's really the key thing. It's teamwork.
That's it. And so it's, do it for yourself, do it for your daughter. Be curious, be childlike, ask questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant, Nicky. I'm going to leave it there with you today because I could talk to you absolutely all day about this. We could talk for hours. I love this topic. It really is. I hope it was really helpful for people. I'm sure it will be. We're going to put this out onto the podcast. But just before we kind of wrap up, can you just tell people a little bit about your book that you had?
Sure. So I've written 2 books, actually. The first one is called Hormones, Health and Human Potential, and you can get it on Amazon. And that takes you through, it's got 2 acts, like you said, Kira, I like my ballet, and stories. So Act 1 goes through, all the things about hormones, the different systems, its effects, the bones, RED, we have a chapter on that. And then Act 2 is going through the 7 stages of man and woman. And it goes through, it's sort of what we said, but it includes the men and, even more sort of a detail. So that's 1 book. And then specifically for menopause, I've edited a book called Myths of Menopause. So I've got some contributions from some other colleagues, friends. And that's also available on Amazon. So as the name suggests, that's obviously specifically about menopause. But both books I've written in a way like we've discussed things, in the stories. So hopefully people can relate and understand practical tips. I've got little hormone stories in there. And for those that are keen and eager beaver, don't worry, there are plenty of references if you want to go and look up things in more detail. It's all evidence-based information, but hopefully written in a way that you can, you really get your teeth into the knowledge and with some practical suggestions.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, guys, if there's men listening to this, by the way, or your husband, the book's brilliant for guys as well. I've learned a lot from it. There's a lot of stuff you can kind of take away from it. So it's a really cool. So how can people work with you, Nicky? So I know we've been doing a bit of mentorship together. I know that's something that you'd like to explore a little bit with coaches and things. So what options do you have for people to come and work with you?
So if people want health advisory appointments, I call them. If you want to talk in more details about HRT, about REDs, about teenagers, whatever it is, anything to do with hormones. So I offer those one-to-one appointments. So that's on my website. My website is Nicky Keay Fitness. So that's one option if you want to work with me in that context. I also give talks and presentations. That's another, if you're listening to this and you're part of a sports club or something, I can give talks. And yes, as you mentioned, Keir, this is my new, I've really enjoyed, mentoring you, working with you, Keir. So yeah, that's something else. If you're listening to this and you are a coach or in any context, whether you're working at a school or a club and you want some more guidance, well, I've enjoyed working with you, Keir, and I think we've, got a good relationship, partnership going. So yeah, that's another area. If you're interested in that, just get in contact and see what we can work out.
And I'll just add to that, for coaches, people who are working with women, it gives you such a lot of confidence as well when you've got someone like Nicky in your back pocket, so to speak. It is like a confidence in your back pocket. It really is. It's just good to have that conversation. And I've enjoyed the process. I'm enjoying the process even, and I've learned so much. It's absolutely, yeah. I would highly recommend you go and work with Nicky. So where can people find you, Nicky? Where do you hang out on social media? Where can people find you? By the way, I'll put all the links.
Sure. Well, that's Nicky Keay Fitness. And otherwise, my tag on social media is at Dr. Nicky Keay, and K is spelled Keay. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I'm not sure about X. I am there lingering, but anyway. So I'm on LinkedIn as well. So I'm definitely on LinkedIn, and I put some posts there. So yeah, you can definitely find me, and I try and keep up to let people know what I'm doing, but otherwise my website as well. So yeah, I look forward to, working with you in whatever capacity.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Dr. Nicky. It was an absolute pleasure, and I would love to bring you on again sometime.
Cheers. Thanks, Keir. Bye.
Thank you.